continue with a series of natural science talks. My name is Isaac Ginis, and what I'm going to focus on my presentation is how the changes in the global climate related to the weather. In particular, I'll be focusing on extreme, so-called extreme weather conditions, or extreme weather events, such as hurricanes, floods, tornadoes. Certainly when we talk about the impact of global warming, and there's a number of changes, a large spectrum of changes that we are already seeing and probably will continue to see in the future that John just discussed. And those are the changes that gradually will accumulate into the future. However, one of the most dangerous implications of global warming is the worsening of extreme weather. And this is taking place around the world in terms of the intensity, the frequency, and the impact, fatalities and damage. So let me start by showing this map. This is from the IPCC report 2007, and it shows the globe and different continents, and you see insert the boxes that show the temperature change at every continent. And the black color shows the observed temperature. And you can clearly see that virtually in all the locations, the temperature is rising. Incidentally, this blue and red colors indicate the computer model simulations that John just discussed, and blue color are the simulations that computer models produced without taking into account the increase of the CO2 concentration. And you can see that in that case, models were not able to reproduce the rise of the temperature. However, if the effect of CO2 increase is included, and those models are very much consistent with the observed temperature. So by looking at this map, you can certainly see that essentially virtually there's no place in the globe that would not feel the impact of global warming. And so what I'm going to show next is just examples, most recent examples around the world of really extreme weather events. And you will see that in many instances, the records of observed impact has been broken significantly. So let's start with the first example, is August 2003 heat wave in Europe. The temperature is, in Western Europe, in many locations, exceeded 100 degrees. And that has an enormous impact, economic, but more than 70,000 people died. One of the reasons for such an enormous amount of death is just in many European households, they do not have air conditioning. And you can see in places like in France, about 20,000 people died. In Italy, about 20,000 people died. This event in Mumbai, 2005, in July, it was enormous rainfall. And typically they have flooding in India during the monsoon seasons. However, this particular event exceeded all the records, 37 inches in one day. And more than 1,100 people died. The same year, August 2005, was most of you know, all of you remember, Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina reached Category 5, the highest intensity in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. Fortunately, its intensity decreased before landfall to Category 3. Still, this has been the largest natural disaster in American history. More than $110 billion of damage, and more than 1,800 people died. 2 weeks later, after Hurricane Katrina, there was Hurricane Rita that also reached Category 5 intensity in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And Unfortunately, Rita also decreased its intensity before landfall in Texas to category 1 and did not make significant damage. Another example, get back to Europe, 2007, the record flood in the UK. What this map shows is that the percentage of the increase of the flood compared to a long-term average. And this dark blue color indicates the values of about 370%, so almost 4 times more than average. And that was a largest economic impact in the UK history from flood. Another example, February 2009, Australia, wildfires, largest in the record, more than 175 people died. 2010 was one of the most devastating season or year in terms of natural disasters around the world. The record flood in Pakistan, in China, in Russia, that had the hottest summer on record. 56,000 people died, mostly because of wildfires. Well, let's look at the US now. How many of you remember maybe February 2010, the snowstorm in the Washington, Maryland area? The record snowfall, increasing 2 feet of snow during this storm. Well, some of you might ask how the climate change might be related, and the global warming might be related to the winter storms. And this is a good example that illustrates what the connections between the changes in the temperature, in this case, the warming of the ocean, causes the increase of the snow during the winter storms. So what is shown in the middle is a satellite image of essentially the airflow of moist air coming from the tropics, moving to the west, northwest, that collided with a cold air coming from the north. And on the left panel, you can see the temperature anomalies of the ocean temperature relative to the average. And it was a record high temperature in the tropics. And the larger the temperature is, the more evaporation is coming to the atmosphere, and there's a more moisture supply. And that moisture, when it's moving to the north and collides with the cold air, it produces enormous amount of precipitation. In this case, it's snow event. In 2011, almost the same story, however, on a much larger scale. This blizzard in February 2011 affected 30 states, more than 100 million people. This is the satellite image, one of the most scariest I've ever seen in my life. Some people call it a monster storm. This is a satellite image that's showing essentially the snow cover from Texas to Maine. Essentially, half of the United States being covered by such an enormous storm. And few months later, we have a record drought in the southeast. Texas experienced the driest summer, and it's been estimated more than $5 billion of economic losses. A month later, Hurricane Irene. What is unusual, what was unusual about Hurricane Irene is its enormous size. I think this is the largest size we ever seen of the storm that made landfall in the US. It made landfall in 4 states, North Carolina, New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. And 11 states were affected by this storm. 56 fatalities, more than $10 billion of damage. Of course, we all remember the storm in Rhode Island. So let's look, well, let me show you another example. This is a storm that you also remember. was a few months later after Hurricane Irene. The most extraordinary winter storms we've seen in a record. If you look at this image, you wouldn't say that was taken in October. But look at this date, October 29th. Newark, New Jersey had more than 5 inches of snow. So now let's look at the statistics, which is quite staggering. What is shown here is the number of events per year that exceeded $1 billion of damage for the last 30 years, from 1980 to 2011. And what you can clearly see that the number of $1 billion or more events continues to increase. In fact, the largest number will reach this year, 2011. And the economic losses also continue to increase. The IPCC report that will come out actually in a few months, particularly focusing on extreme weather, confirms that actually extreme weather getting worse. And the scientists are virtually certain, which means a 99% certainty, that this will continue into the future. And also the scientists believe 95% certainties that the main attribution to the increase of the frequency and intensity of extreme events are related to the human-induced global warming impact. Not all weather events can be clearly related, or at least at this time, there's no insufficient evidences that would relate those events to the climate change. Particular high impact and smaller scale events such as tornadoes, dust storms, or lightning. We know that they happen quite frequent, but there's not clear correlation between the frequency of those events and the changes in the global temperature. And the same is with tropical cyclones and hurricanes. We do not see clear signal yet of the increase of number of storms due to global warming. This is the history of the number of landfalling hurricanes in the US for the last 150 years, and there is no clear trend. However, the length of the hurricane seasons clearly increases. If you look at the 140-year time period, we had only 30 hurricanes that occurred after November 1st, so-called the late season hurricanes. On average, 1 in 5 years. However, in the last 20 years, we already had 15 late hurricanes. So it's an increase of about 3.5 times. However, if we use the computer models to predict what are the changes we might expect in terms of hurricanes frequency and intensity, and this is a latest study published recently in the Science magazine that shows that the total number of storms might actually decrease due to the global warming. But those storms that reach hurricane intensity, particularly, will have more conditions more favorable to reaching category 4 and 5 intensity limit. So what you see here is that the blue color is the number of storms of category 1. Slightly the number will decrease. Category 2 and 3 will slightly decrease, but a category 4 and 5 will increase by 81%. And the rainfall that's produced by hurricanes will also increase by about 20%. So it is estimated that the total damage potential will increase by 28%. This is another way to look at this. results, again from the same paper by NOAA scientists. The upper panel shows the number of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes in the current climate. And the lower panel shows the same Category 4, Category 5 hurricanes, but in a warmer climate. And you can see significantly larger number of very intense storms. Well, let's look what you might expect in terms of impact on Rhode Island. We know we frequently have northeasters, and in average we have from 12 to 15 every year. It is projected that we will have at least one more, and perhaps more intense northeasters. But the most significant and potentially most the largest impact that we might expect from the sea level rise. And more intense storms will increase the probability of the coastal and inland flood events. And also, because of the sea level rise, even the minor storms can produce flooding and storm surge increase and the impact such as coastal erosion. So be prepared. Thank you.